Hey, what's happening, guys? This is Ujo here, and back with the glare of death. So this video, I'm gonna actually speak to you guys a little bit about side decking, and specifically side decking in Kozmo. If you guys saw my last video, if you haven't, please like back out of this one, go take a look at that one, and then come back here because I want to talk to you guys a little bit about side decking in Yu-Gi-Oh! More like to the point, side decking in Cosmo. Because I don't actually really see anybody just taking the time out to break this stuff down. I've played in a lot of major events in my day but I've played in a lot of major events, and one of the biggest I want to say edges that I've had was I knew how to side deck with my deck. I knew exactly a game plan coming in versus every matchup I wanted to beat, every deck I wanted to beat, every single sort of like game that I was going into. I actually just knew what cards I was boarding out, what cards I was putting in, exactly, what permeations of how many, or, I had a fairly large edge in that, especially in one of the Shonen Jumps that I very, very, very nearly topped, which was Shonen Jump Columbus 2009. I actually came in 17th place. And this is back before they did top 32. This is when they just cut to top 16. So, without any further ado, I'm going to hop into what the hell this actually means and just kind of give you guys a little breakdown. So, if you don't know, please be warned, your discretion is advised. I tend to talk a lot. So, here we go. In Fire King version of Cosmo, which is the one I currently play, if you're playing Cosmo Control, you can kind of apply this as well. Just you'll just have to switch around the amounts of cards in these two piles with the amounts of cards in these piles, and I'll explain what that means here in just a second. So this first pile over here, which is obviously the smallest one, this pile is the high priority pile. These are the cards that will just pretty much always come out no matter what matchup you're playing against. As you can see, it's only 5 cards. It's the two Dark Planets, Yaksha, Baby Garunix, and Fire King Island. They will pretty much always get boarded out in almost every single matchup because people's board plan is to stop this. People's board plan is to punish you for playing this combo in your deck. And if you win game one, this gives you just a super sized edge in game two because they're going to board in cards that stop you from comboing, or they're going to board in cards that hose you for having the combo. And you're not going to have that. And that's going to just destroy them because they're going to board in usually 2 to 4 just completely useless cards. And that's going to just break the matchup for you. And it's going to mitigate a lot of that pressure of going second, being an OTK deck. Now, this right here is going to be the second largest pile. This is the pile of cards that you mainly are not going to cut. And this is the pile that you can bring these out depending on the matchup. These are your non-intuitive combo piece cards like Terraforming. These are your Landwalker #2, your Dark Lady #2, your 2 Cosmojos, your Call the Haunteds, and your Allure of Darknesses. Obviously, if you put them on boarding in like macros or defis and like the floodgate matchups, you don't want cards like, Allure of Darkness in your deck. I mean, not Allure of Darkness, Call the Haunted in your deck. They just do nothing. As you can see, I didn't put all 3 Call the Haunted here. If you watch my deck list, you see that I played 3 Call the Haunted and only 2 Cosmojo. I have the third Mojo. I just, at the moment, I'm trying out 3 Call the Haunted because I really am in love with this card. I actually want to go all the way up to 5, but this isn't Cosmo Control. You have to fit a lot of combo pieces in. The allures, if you're boarding down like dark targets, like your second Landwalker, your Dark Lady, your 2 Dark Planets, this card gets considerably worse because you're gonna have a lot less darks in your deck. So you don't want to just draw this card and it has to get rid of your whole hand, unless you have like a call play or something like that. But that's unreasonable. You don't want to have cards like this in your deck. So, and I'm not saying you're gonna board out all of the copies of it. What I'm saying is that you're going to board out, 1 or 2 or something like that. That's why this is the low priority pile, or the mid priority pile, I should say. That's why this pile is like this, is because you can fiddle around with the numbers and get them to how you want. There's usually no correct or incorrect amount. The only thing is that if you put this up here, that doesn't make any sense because you want this card in your main deck. You want this card. It outs floodgates. It outs, all that kind of craziness. But it gets hosed by cards like Imperial Iron Wall, so you might want to board 1 out and keep the second one in. Just, once you've outed the Iron Wall, now your Mojo's live again or something like that. You don't want to you want to give your deck the least amount of dead draws as possible, especially when you're playing from the top of your deck. The reason I put Dark Lady over here is because in certain matchups like Monarchs, Dark Lady is awesome when you have control of the game, so you can just like out their squires, their myth throws, and all that kind of stuff. But it's bad in every other situation. You don't want to because you're going to be drawing into this card, or you're going to be floating into this card, and it's just going to get ran over by a 2800 beat stick, which then is going to go to 36 because they have domain on the board or something like that. So that's not great. And I usually board out one of these in the Monarch matchup, and I tend to keep this in. And in the mirror match, I tend to board out one of these and keep this in. It just depends on the matchup. That's why this pile exists. It gives you access to boarding in the optimal amount of cards. And we're gonna talk a little bit about overboarding too, because you don't want to overboard. But anyway, I've already explained this, and this card is the most easily cuttable card in your deck. It gives you can cut from one all the way up to all three copies because it's literally non-intuitive if you're not on the combo, but it does find your Kozmo Town. So a lot of the times I just leave one in and board the other two out for more intuitive, more proactive cards that progress the game state or give me the best chance to win, like a hoser card, like Magical Deflector versus Monarch. If these two are Magic Deflectors and I'm drawing Magic Deflectors instead, I'm winning that game a lot of the times. Magic Deflector backed up by like a big ship is that's just spells doom for Monarch half the time anyway. And if they're attacking into you and you go like, and they're banking on their domain getting over your Dark Destroyer and you just flip Magical Deflector, they just lose. So that's a pretty big deal. So this is the deepest pile that you have to explain right here is this one, because these are your floaters in between this and this pile. It just gives you access to it. These are the cards that are easily cuttable. Usually not all of them, sometimes all of them, depending on the matchup. That gives you access to boarding in more cards. Now, let's talk about overboarding. So you don't want to, especially when playing a combo deck, you don't want to destroy the integrity of your deck by boarding in 15 cards for every single matchup, and now your deck looks like a pile of, well, a trade binder. It doesn't look like a deck anymore. You're gonna have so many cards that you're drawing that, yeah, when they work, but you can't actually close the game. You can't actually win the game because you have so many cards that are focused on stopping you from losing that you're not doing what's important, which is winning. And that's actually just worse than boarding too little, is overboarding. So that's something I learned from playing a long, 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 long time and playing a ton of Magic. Magic really taught me the importance of side decking. So I'm gonna talk a little bit about I'm gonna give you just guys like one sort of scenario of boarding, and this is just my board plan going into a matchup. So if I'm playing against the Kozmo Mirror match, I usually board out all of these. Sometimes I'll keep in one Dark Planet depending on how weak I saw them to it, like how weak they are to Dark Planet, if they know how to play around it or whatnot like that. If they just folded to Dark Planet before, you bet your ass I'm keeping one in. But I'm not keeping both in because this card it just contributes a lot to bricking and contributes a lot to dead draws, and I don't want to have to rely on having to draw Kozmo Town in order to mulligan it back in or something like that, or having to make Durendal in order to ship it back into my deck in order to make it live again, or making some pure light play or something like that. I don't have to rely on that. So obviously these don't come in versus the mirror match. If you guys saw my if you saw my deck profile, this is the only card I've changed since then. I changed out a Cosmorning for a Chaos Hunter. If I was playing pure Kozmo, I would play 3 of these, or if I wasn't playing the Kaiju engine. In any case, if I wasn't playing the Kaiju engine, there'd be 3 of these in this damn deck. This card is the nuts. This is the best card in the extra deck. I mean, in the side deck by miles and miles and miles. It just completely breaks the mirror match in half. So I'd bring in 1 Chaos Hunter. I always bring in all of the Kaijus versus pretty much every matchup, and both the Slumbers. This card is really insane to discard with a Twin Twister, actually, when you don't want to just like wrath the board away. I bring in 1 to 2 Twin Twisters to out their floodgates. Usually, if I win game 1, I start with 1 because I have a lot of flexibility to lose game 2. But some of the times you just want to bring in both. You just kind of want to hedge, even if this card is dead, and even if it does nothing, you can just like catch a call on Haunted when it's being flipped or something like that. So it's not completely dead. I don't bring in Dark Hole unless I saw them playing some like soft lock monster. I usually, if I'm going first, I bring in Magical Deflector because it stops teleport and it stops Kozmo Town. Some of the times I'll still hedge with one just to kind of turn off Cosmo Town on their turn. Like as soon as they start their turn, I flip Magic Deflector to turn their Cosmo Towns off. But that you have to be far ahead for that to matter. And I don't bring in Fairy Winds because they're not Floodgate side deck. So this is usually the board plan that I stick with right here. And as you can see, it's 9 cards. That's a lot. I won't lie here, but you have 5 cards that are immediately coming out anyway. So now we're going to go to our low priority pile. And the first card I'm going to cut at is Terraforming. I usually start with 2. Because it's the mirror match, I board out Mojo. Mojo doesn't target, or it's not a cost rather, but it's just not great in the mirror, right? It's like you have it just forces you, it just makes them flinch first a little bit sometimes, but if you're not really far ahead, this card can't do anything. It does proc combo plays, but it's not really that great. And then these are the cards I'd start at. Now, I leave a lure in so I can draw these kinds of cards, and this should be the Dark Kaiju, so don't get that twisted. If this was a Dark Kaiju, my lures would be a lot better, but I do have these to pitch my lures to, or I even set lures as bluffs sometimes. But these are the 9 cards, and I'm sorry about the sniffles, guys. I still got allergy problems, like really, really bad. My eyes are swollen and puffy and all that kind of stuff, but, woe is me. I know you didn't come here to hear me, boo-hoo. You came here to learn about side decking, and, just how to, progress in the game of Yu-Gi-Oh! So, this is a pretty standard package for me as far as that. And as you can see, these 5 cards are pretty much never going to change. Only these cards are going to change. The only time one of these cards changes is Yaksha, and that's if it's the BA matchup. I really want to keep this in so I can have access to Make Dweller. And in that world, I always, 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 in the BA matchup, I always board out these cards, one of these, this, and this. I always board out the Allures, I always board out a Landwalker, and I always board out my Terraformings, because Yaksha gives you the access to Make Dweller, and even in the mirror match sometimes I just switch out like a Terraforming for a Yaksha so I can have access to Make Dweller with Wicked Witch plus Yaksha equals Dweller. So this isn't like the best plan on planet Earth. I won't say that it is, but this has won me a lot of games, and this is just having that slight edge. Giving up, sacrificing a little bit of power for having knowledge is so much more valuable. So, like I said, work through your deck. See what cards that in what matchups that you've played against. I try to learn how to identify your low priority cards and identify your high priority cards to cut and to move around in your deck and to shuffle them around a little bit. Try to identify that. And when you get to that point, you have so much more visibility to a matchup and so much more power going into a matchup, because as they always said, knowledge is power, right? So you go into a matchup knowing from point A to point B exactly what's happening. From start to finish how you're going to approach this matchup, how you're going to go in and just wreck your opponent's day. And I've always said to all my friends, I want to be the guy who ends the guy in front of me's tournament. So and if you guys are wondering what this is, it's just my extra deck. I always sit around like trying to like go through combos and go through situations and scenarios. And if you're going to a major event, you should not be probably doing this if you're playing Kozmo, because you're not going to run into like Raid Raptors at the top tables. You don't want to build your deck for the first 3 rounds. You want to build your deck for the last 2. You want to build your deck for the top 8. So that's just been my deck profile, and that's been like my tips and tricks on how to, tips and tricks video on how to sideboard. I'm going to work on this freaking glare. I'm going to work on trying to figure that out, because this Dark Destroyer over here has not been getting any love. It's just been glared out most of the video, and I'll catch you guys later. Please leave me a comment down below. Hit that thumbs up button, subscribe, come back. I'm gonna do a lot of talks, because I have a very deep understanding of the game. I like to believe anyway, and I've accomplished a few things in this game, and I've been behind the scenes deck building for a lot of the top players who are from Nashville, Tennessee. If you guys don't know, I'm from Nashville, Tennessee, and I'm gonna bring you guys some videos about just theory and making your game elevate to the next level. So please, subscribe, come back, check me out. I've even said in the last comment, please critique me as harsh as possible. I want to progress. I want to get better, and you can only get better. Ideals only get better when they're continuously scrutinized. That way, only the best ideals can rise to the top. So, you know, check this video out, share with some friends, link it to some other people, and I'll catch you guys later. This has been your boy, Ijo Ujo. Peace.